Cops mock a black man on trial, unaware that he is the director of the FBI. Before we dive into today's incredible story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and show some love by giving this video a thumbs up. It all started with a quiet, sharp laugh, dismissive and mocking. "Look at this guy," Officer Jensen muttered, nudging his partner as the tall black man in the perfectly tailored charcoal suit stepped into the courtroom. "Bet he's one of those smooth-talking public defenders. Thinks he can outsmart the system."
They were so sure of themselves.
But that man didn't flinch, not even for a second. He didn't glance in their direction. He carried himself with calm dignity, back straight, stride steady. He nodded respectfully to the judge before making his way to the third row, where he quietly took a seat in the gallery. To the officers, he was just another black man walking into the courtroom. They saw his skin before they saw anything else. That was their first mistake. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, the media was buzzing with coverage of the case. A young black college student, Darius Mitchell, had been arrested 2 months prior on charges of resisting arrest and assaulting a police officer. The body cam footage had mysteriously disappeared. Witnesses told different stories, and the officers, Jensen and Burke, stuck to their version of events, claiming that Darius had been aggressive, threatening, and violent. Inside the courtroom, there was a palpable tension in the air. The room wasn't crowded, but it felt like something monumental was about to happen, something bigger than just one trial. As the prosecution began to present its case, the two officers sat smugly behind their attorney. Officer Burke kept sneaking glances at the man in the suit in the gallery, whispering something to Jensen. Another quiet laugh followed. "What's he even doing here?" "Probably some relative trying to look important," Burke said with a smirk. They didn't notice the subtle exchange between the judge and the suited man. They didn't catch the respectful nods from court officers as he passed by. They didn't see the ADA pause, even if just for a moment, to register his presence. The man didn't say a word. He simply watched, calm and composed. Darius sat quietly beside his public defender, his hands tightly folded in his lap. He looked drained, not just physically but emotionally, spiritually even. It was like the fight had been sucked out of him long before he even stepped into that courtroom. Behind him, his mother sat, wringing her hands, whispering quiet prayers into her trembling fingers. The defense made its argument. Darius had been walking home from a friend's apartment, earbuds in, unaware that the officers had called out to him. When he turned around and saw them approaching, guns holstered but hands near their weapons, he panicked. Who wouldn't? Like any young black man in America might, he raised his hands, telling them he was unarmed.
But they tackled him anyway.
Officer Burke took the stand, his voice dripping with exaggerated conviction. "We feared for our safety," he claimed. But there were no bruises on either officer, no medical records, just paperwork and a story that far too many had heard before. Then, the defense rested, and the judge called for a recess before closing arguments. That's when everything changed. The man in the suit stood up. He walked past the attorneys, past the stunned defendant, and made his way to the front of the bench. "Your Honor," he said, his voice smooth, calm, and steady, "if I may address the court for a moment." The judge straightened, then gave him the slightest smile. "Of course, Director Hayes. You have the floor." A ripple of surprise swept through the room. "Director? Hayes?" Officer Jensen stiffened. "What the hell?" he whispered. The man turned slowly to face the courtroom. "My name is Malcolm Hayes. I am the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Gasps echoed softly from the gallery. One woman covered her mouth in disbelief. Darius's mother nearly dropped her purse. Hayes continued, his voice firm but calm. "And I came here today not as the head of a federal agency, but as a black man in America. I came because I read this case file, and what I saw was a story I know all too well. I saw a young man being criminalized simply for his skin. I saw missing footage. I saw discrepancies. And most of all, I saw two officers who failed to see the human being standing in front of them." He locked eyes with Officers Jensen and Burke. "I've been stopped too. I've been followed in stores. I've had guns drawn on me while jogging in my own neighborhood. The only difference between Darius Mitchell and me is the suit I'm wearing and the title I carry." The room fell into stunned silence. And I want everyone in this room to think about what that says. If the man you mocked today had been wearing a hoodie instead of a suit, you would have dismissed him completely. And that's exactly what you did to Darius. He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I will not interfere in your ruling, but I ask that the court consider the larger pattern here. This isn't about one night. It's about a system that far too often mistakes presence for guilt and skin for threat." Turning back to Darius, Hayes's voice softened. "You're not invisible, son. You matter. And you are not alone." The courtroom remained silent, the tension thick. No one laughed now. Officer Burke's jaw tightened. Jensen stared down at the floor, suddenly interested in the courtroom tiles. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. The verdict? Not guilty. Outside, reporters swarmed the courthouse. The story was already viral. FBI director shocks courtroom during trial of black teen. Clips of Hayes's speech were circulating online faster than news anchors could report them. But Director Hayes didn't stay for interviews. Instead, he found Darius and his mother standing outside, overwhelmed, unsure of what to do next. "Thank you, sir," Darius said quietly, his voice cracking, tears welling in his eyes. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Hayes replied with a reassuring smile. "Because one day, it'll be your turn to do it for someone else." That evening, Officer Jensen handed in his badge. He said nothing, simply walked into the precinct, dropped it on the desk, and walked out. Officer Burke was placed on administrative leave pending a review, though the mayor's office had already released a statement expressing deep concerns about systemic failures within the department. The following morning, Director Hayes returned to Washington. He sat at his desk, staring out the window of his office overlooking the Capitol, reflecting on the quiet battle he'd fought his whole life. He thought about the countless times he'd had to bite his tongue, clench his jaw, and bury his anger. And about how, just this once, he hadn't stayed silent. Respect should never be determined by appearance. Justice should never depend on titles. The worth of a man should never be judged by the color of his skin. Not everyone in that courtroom left changed, but some did. And sometimes, that's enough to spark change. In a world where judgment often comes before understanding, one man's presence was enough to shake a broken system. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, remember, the quietest voices sometimes carry the loudest truths.